presence of, hi, Jim. All right. Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I would like to call the June 7, 2021 meeting of the Acton Select Board and the Sewers Commissioners to order. This is a virtual meeting hosted through the Zoom platform. This meeting will also be streamed online on ActonTV YouTube live channel and broadcast live on the radio on WAEM 94.9 FM. And to participate remotely from a computer, use the link to join the public meeting, actonma.gov/meeting/BOS, or from a phone, dial 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. Matt Murphy, are there any citizen concerns?
Let's just give it 1 second. I don't see any hands up right now.
Okay. Okay, so for the chair's update, I would like to extend very special thanks to Jim McCrae for the Memorial Day observance at Woodlawn Cemetery on May 31, which all of us attended, and Dean was one of the speakers. Then we may need an additional meeting next Monday. I'm trying to clear as much of the deck as we can so the new board can start clean on July 12th. There were approximately 42 reappointments to boards and committees for positions that are due to expire on June 30th. And we may also need an executive session regarding the Weatherby property. I asked John to follow up with Attorney Ray Lyons. So, John, the manager's report, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Just a couple notes. The board, as you recall, we acquired an open space parcel on Piper Lane. With it came a home that we tried to sell, we tried to give away, we tried to get someone to pick it up and move it, and none of those efforts resulted in any takers, so we're beginning demolition in a few weeks. If you've driven by, you've seen there's a new house being built. It's probably nearly completed. We're hoping to get the demo completed before that person moves in so that there's not much of disruption. Flag Day ceremony, James McCrae, along with some partners, the Boy Scouts and others, will be holding a Flag Day ceremony at 9 a.m. this Saturday at Woodlawn Cemetery off Concord Road. Another item, just an update, the Regional Emergency Communication Center project we're working on with Concord. We still haven't heard back yet from the state regarding our grant, but we're proceeding with some tentative planning so that we can mobilize quickly, get started on that this summer if we do get that funding. The Water District, our friends over at Acton Water District have created a working group to look at the issues surrounding PFAS. And we're some staff that work here in Town Hall. We're going to be participating in that effort, which is ongoing right now. The North Acton Fire Station project is moving along quickly and effectively. We're on track for finishing it up this fall on schedule, which is good news. If you've driven down there lately, you've noticed there's a sidewalk on Harris Street.
Yes, very nice.
So that was funded from a state grant. So thank you to our partners at the state. And there's a little bit more work to do on that, but you can see it's there and it's very exciting to have another sidewalk. There's another event coming up related to the local rapid recovery program that we're participating in related to Great Road and trying to find ways to boost that commercial corridor and help those businesses over there. And so we're having a meeting on June 16th, which is next Wednesday. And it's a Zoom meeting, and information is going to be posted online today or tomorrow if it's not up there already. But it's basically anyone's invited, and we'll be talking about the different strategies and ways to support recovery efforts for the Great Road businesses. So please check that out, 7 p.m., June 16th. Another workshop that I wanted to mention is on June 30th. Director Andrea Becerra is off and running with the Green Advisory Board and other folks to work on our climate action planning. And there's going to be a workshop on June 30th. And we would ask you to consider attending that workshop. And also, there's a survey, a very brief survey, that we'd love for you to fill out. We'll be posting flyers for that everywhere. But if you have questions about that, please contact Andrea, ABECERRA at actonma.gov. And that is all for me. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Member minutes, Jim?
Sure. Got a couple of things. First, I wanted to reinforce what John said about the Acton Water District Pfas working group and give a little background on what's been going on there as the liaison to the Acton Water District. So the first thing I wanted to say is that there has been a lot of conversation about PFAS after the mandatory notice from the Acton Water District with the language all as laid out by the state that went out to residents in May, when one of our sources of water went from the North Acton plant, went from the 20 parts per trillion that is now allowed by the state to 21. There's a lot of information at actonwater.com that I'd encourage people to go to learn more about PFAS. You can get on a mailing list to learn about, to get regular updates about the PFAS situation there. But I guess the thing I wanted to say from my non-educated point of view is that all of the sources of water are combined to deliver water to your tap. And no one in Acton is getting at their tap water that has illegally high limits of PFAS. I mean, I'm still drinking the Acton water. I encourage other people to do so. There are people with specialized health conditions that might want to consider alternatives. But frankly, for me, the degree of oversight and transparency in a public body like the Acton Water District is a lot more reassuring to me than the level of oversight and regulation that happens to large companies that deliver bottled water. What else do I want to say? So what the Acton Water District does in response to finding any overly high levels of any contaminant in any one of their wells is to shut off that well, so that it's not coming into our water supply. They do that as soon as they identify those levels. So we have now traded off a water quality issue for a water quantity issue. A couple of wells have been taken offline. Other wells will eventually be coming online, but are not there yet. Eventually, there will be state-accepted treatments for PFAS. Those don't exist yet at the volumes of water that are coming through our treatment plants. And eventually there's the beginnings of progress on locating where the various sources of the PFAS in our town's water, which could also, cut off the traveling of the PFAS into our water supply. But in the meantime, predictions are looking ahead to the summer months, which are heavily the months when we use the most water in Acton. There may be supply problems. There may be not enough water. It's not clear yet whether there will or won't be, but there's certainly red warning signs. And that's why this short-term PFAS working group has been put together in case the town and the water district need to cooperate on figuring out what to do. I mean, relatively drastic measures that haven't been taken for a long time in the town of Acton, such as, not allowing new hookups or not allowing new permits that would use new water, have to be on the table. We're in a very serious water supply situation, even if we are not, I believe, in a serious water quality situation. But the two go together. That's it. I'm happy to attempt to answer questions if people want to contact me, but the people that really know what's going on are the folks at the Acton Water District. So I recommend people calling them or contacting them. The only other thing I wanted to mention was at the last Acton Housing Authority meeting, we found out the sad fact that John Mangiarotti, our town manager, also alerted us to recently, which is that the apartments at Powdermill, the large 40B project that was putting us over our 10%, have been delayed for at least 6 months to the process of going to a building permit. The current developer is looking to sell the project to another developer. What that means is that we're currently in a safe harbor for 40B projects that protect us from 40B projects that are not approved by the Board of Selectmen and the ACHC, the Acton Community Housing Corporation. And as of August, assuming that no magic happens with these building permits, the state will probably remove us from that safe harbor. And we will not be back in that safe harbor until either this project starts getting its building permits or something else happens. That also may impact some of the part of this project was a substantial contribution to the water treatment plant in order to provide for the extra infrastructure necessary to supply that development with sewage facilities. And I don't know what kind of an impact that will have on our on our whole the finances of the wastewater treatment plant. So I look forward to learning more about that and letting people know. I think that's it for me. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Is Barry Rosen available? Barry's the chairman of the water district. Is he available now?
Absolutely, he's in the attendee list.
All right. Well, could you put him on?
There
Barry?
he is.
I just brought him up.
Barry?
He's muted.
Took me a minute to unmute, guys.
Yeah.
I'm not that fast with the mouse.
Jim, in his update, talked about a serious water supply situation we may be facing this summer. Would you be comfortable just speaking to that, Jim's comment?
Jim is very accurate in what he said. Jim and I have been in contact with each other on I would say a very regular basis to exchange information. I think to clarify it a little more is because actually all the wells associated with North Acton, which are two large well fields, the Kennedy wells and the Marshall well fields, which are a number of wells, not just two wells. All of them have been shut down because they require processing for a lot of reasons. So because we haven't been able to get the output of the plant down, those wells have been temporarily, the plant and the wells have been temporarily removed from the system. We also have one of the Conant wells, which normally is powered on in the summer, that has been removed. The reason it has been removed had nothing to do with Pfas directly. It was removed because there's construction taking place there, and the construction of a new water plant and the building that houses it had to be turned over to the construction company because they're essentially going to rebuild the building and then reconnect the pipes to the plant. So we are short a number of wells that normally would be available for summer use, which, like most water systems, the heaviest use is generally in the summer. So even though the state, and this could change, it changes on Thursday evenings, even though the water district is not in what the state classifies as a drought situation, Acton could be short on water, and Acton's water is mostly supplied by gravity feed from keeping enough water in the towers. If you don't have enough water in the towers, you don't have enough firefighting water. So we keep those towers filled, and we don't want to over pump all the wells. That's the central reason. So because we have wells out of service due to Pfas and also due to construction, we're asking the town to still maintain a 1 day per week outside irrigation, but we allow you to use your water hose, if you have fruits and vegetables, you can use your hose to water it on the normal odd even days that your parcel home was scheduled to water. But for lawn watering, which uses the majority of the water, we ask you only water on your Thursday or Friday, whatever your day is. And if you don't know what your day is, you can go to the Acton water site, and there's, using the GIS system, you click on your address and it will tell you what day your zone of town is allowed to water. It is not based on odd and even. Now, we do have, as you know, construction going on in Central Acton. That will take a little bit of time to get permitted because there's all kinds of stuff you've got to go through for the Mass DEP. So those two wells can't be used yet. We did, at the annual meeting of the Water District, the voters approved a $1 million withdrawal from our reserve, essentially, the Grace Fund. They approved $1 million to get a well that the state has already approved. It's called the Assabet number 3 well, to get that online. It's approved as a water source. It happens to be a well with very low PFAS in it. I think the latest, we tested it, I think the latest was a 3, but very, very low. It will take some time to get that well online because we do have to get and go to bid, which we think will happen after the plans are out in June, because we have to lay pipes to bring that new well into the Acton water system. So the problem we perceive is that we will have to be very, very careful with how we use our existing water, which is good water to drink. It's, as Jim said, it's absolutely safe water. We monitor all our wells monthly. We send out tests for PFAS for everything. And we're very careful. If there's any danger or there's a question, the well is taken offline immediately. Because we have to do that, we're asking the town to please be very, very careful with the water use, but there's no danger that you're going to turn your tap on, the water is going to still come out the tap. But conserve.
Yeah, Barry, is the situation when Jim's talking about a serious water supply situation, it's in the summer months, water use is heavier in the summer because of lawn watering?
Yes, that's why we're asking we're asking residents to restrict to a single day each week of watering.
But where it could get critical is if people don't follow that direction and water their lawns multiple times per week.
That's correct, and that our concern is it did happen in the past 2 years ago on July 4th, when for some reason people thought it was a very hot time. And we didn't even have the PFAS problem, and everybody turned on their taps, outside water taps, and it brought the level of the water tanks dangerously low. And that's when the water district personnel reacted quickly and just said no outside water, because we then created a fire danger. Because when the hydrants are open for a fire, you've got to have a lot of pressure in the water system, and our pressure comes from the tower, the water left in those water towers. The downward pressure of the water is what pressurizes the fire hydrants. So I think we're just asking to please observe and not say, I'm special, I can water 2 or 3 times a week, because we're in this, everybody's in it together. And the water district has sent people out, and they have been monitoring early in the morning to watch what people are doing. And so far, we've asked that an education system be in place, rather than handing out the fines that they're allowed to give out of $200 a day. The people that have been going out, we've asked them just to remind people, explain not to use your water and why not to use the water. But I think, based on what we heard at the last meeting, I think the commissioners are now going to start moving to begin fining people $50 the first time, and then the fine doubles each day. But we're trying not to do that. We just
But
want
the
people to
public
cooperate.
should be, Barry, the public should be aware that if there is a water supply problem, it's likely to be directly related to people not following the direction for water just once a week and doing it multiple
That's
times.
correct. We think there will be enough water, and at the end of the summer, we will be hopefully, we hope, and I shouldn't say the end of the summer, that's too soon. After the summer, we hope to begin, the natural water usage goes down because people are not irrigating as much as the temperatures decline. And also, we hope to be bringing at least 1 or 2 new wells online, both sources which have so far tested to be very, very low in Pfas. One is no Pfas, non-existent. We haven't found it yet in Central Acton.
Okay, thank you, Barry. And on Jim's other comment about the Powdermill project, this is something John and myself, have been following going back to last fall. And the rules of the road are on staying on the subsidized housing inventory is the following. The special permit was awarded to the Powdermill developer at the end of August of 2020. The developer would have 1 year to get his or her building permit. If the building permit isn't obtained by the end of the year, that project, those 230 units, fall off our subsidized housing inventory and bring us under 10% again. I had raised this at an executive session meeting on May 24th to inform the board that they hadn't put in for their permit as of that date. And what we learned today from Lou Levine, who's the attorney for the developer, that a potential sale of the Powdermill project is being pursued, and the earliest permitting could be started would be 6 months, from now. That's the earliest. We are exploring if there is any possibility due to the, an extension can be granted, due to the pandemic. And we've reached out to several people, and we'll be reaching out to the Department of Housing and Community Development to see if that's possible. And I will put this on the agenda for next Monday night for a fuller discussion when we have a little bit more information. Okay, well, thank you. So,
Mr. Chair, there is a request for public comment related to Mr. Grant's minutes. Would you like to take it now or at the end?
let's just, all right, why don't we, so we can move on. What is the public comment, please?
They should be able to speak. It's from a calling user.
Yeah.
Yes, this is Tara from West Acton. I have a quick question about what Barry said about the water shortage.
Okay.
And thank you for the Powdermill update. My question was, Barry, I thought that during discussions at the RAC and the AWG that there was going to be close coordination relative to the permitting of land use. And so my question is while we're in this potential water emergency, that is there going to be a request to the town to not permit any new land use permits, or is the AWG just going to say no new water hookups while we're in this emergency? Thank you.
Barry? Barry?
He's looking for that unmute button, I'm sure.
If someone could just unmute Barry.
You can't unmute him. He can only unmute himself.
All right,
Okay.
Barry.
Yeah, I had to wait for the unmute thing to show up again.
All right.
If I understand Tara's question, I want to make sure I understood it. She's asking if the Acton Water District has asked for no permits to be issued? Is that what I understood the question was, John?
I believe that's the question, yes.
Yes, that was so that there would be no new water hookup requests.
Yeah.
Because under state law, you've got to give the water hookup if the land use is permitted, correct?
If there's a permit issued, we have not asked the town we have not asked the town of Acton to stop all permitting, nor have we asked the town to not issue building permits. However, as I think John and I believe Mr. Snyder Grant, I think explained, there is a committee. I shouldn't call it a committee. That is not correct. It's a Pfas working group that has been formed, which is has requested a member of town government. We don't have be provided to serve on that group also, and that group they are tasked with finding some short-term, basically immediate solutions to Pfas and recommending those solutions to the district water manager, who will then come before the Acton Water District Board of Water Commissioners. Now, could those things be on the table? Sure, they could be, but I am not involved with that group, so I don't know what they've discussed thus far.
Okay, Joan?
I'm going to get off now.
Please,
I'm
yes.
not the meeting. I'm going to mute myself again.
Thank you. Joan? Unmute, please. Unmute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to the voters of Acton for their confidence in me and electing me as a selectman originally. And I have appreciated their support through the years. So thank you to the town of Acton and its voters.
Thank you, Joan, for your service over multiple decades. Then David.
Yes, and I'll just note, in 4 distinct decades. So, yeah, there was a site walk at the 53 River Street site on Saturday. Members of 4 different committees went, CONSCOM, the HDC, the Historical Commission, and the 53 River Street Committee. We had a tour of the site with the archaeological consultant, and also the dam design person was there. Was able to answer questions, and we walked around the site and looked at the places that artifacts were found and things like that.
Thank you. Dean?
No comments. Thank you.
Okay. John, on your COVID-19 response updates.
Thank you. Yeah, we're at a point now at the pandemic where we actually reached 0 cases sometime last week. It's creeped back up a little bit to 3, but we feel very strongly that the situation is under control, and we're very pleased. Just to people who are keeping track of that type of thing, there have been 981 total cases in Acton since this started, and again, there are 3 currently in isolation. We've learned a lot about some of the aid programs available to us, particularly the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Some guidance just came out early this month that we're still analyzing. We actually, I guess the biggest news is that we're estimating 6.9 million, and I think we're going to get 7.07 million. So a little bit more help is on the way. And you know, the guidance that we've seen, which is positive from my perspective, is that the state isn't going to add any additional requirements or restrictions. They're going to follow the Treasury guidelines, which makes it a little easier for us to understand how to use. That was sort of what we were waiting to find out. And now that we know that, we're going to continue working with our internal working group with some projects and ideas and programs and response actions that we think would be appropriate. And we look forward to discussing that with the select board this summer with regard to how to utilize this new resource to really help the community. And it's over a few years. It's not just this year. It's multiple. It's a 2-year project that we can use. 2 years worth of funding we can use and find ways to help our community. So it's very exciting. We're also preparing a presentation for a July meeting to go over all of the programs and services we provided to date using the federal money that we've already received. In addition to the CARES Act allocation of just over $2 million, we also were awarded a $1.6 million grant as a lead community with 4 other towns, and we've been using that to give out funding to small businesses, to families in need of childcare help, and to our food pantries. So it's been really, a lot of help has been given, and we're excited to tell you more about it at the July meeting. So in terms of operations, there's a few items that we'll be addressing later in the meeting with regard to the state of emergency and the transition to in-person meetings. So I can leave that for that time. So thank you.
Thank you, John. So we have 2 public hearings scheduled this evening. The first is the Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on June 7, 2021 at 7:10 p.m., continued from April 26, 2021, virtually on Zoom, actonma.gov/meeting/BOS on the application of Old Mill Development Trust for a site plan special permit number 092820-480 under zoning bylaw section 10.4 at 67 Powdermill Road, map J3, parcel 59-6. The application and accompanying plans can be inspected at the Planning Division office in Town Hall during normal business hours. For information on how to participate remotely and to view the application materials, go to http://doc.actonma.gov/dsweb/collection-1277. Now, the applicant has requested to withdraw the application without prejudice. Without prejudice is a legal term meaning that the developer would be free to bring the application request again in the future. I don't think there's any grounds that we could withdraw his application with prejudice, because there was, nothing that was over the top at all in his request or his behavior and how he moved the project through the process. So if there's not any further discussion, could I have a motion to approve the applicant's request to withdraw his application for special permit number 09/28/20-480.
So moved.
John moves. Is there a second? Second, Dean. Okay, if there's no further discussion.
I have a brief comment before we vote.
Sure.
This was obviously a very complex application, and I just wanted to note the amazing ability of a seriously depleted planning department to be able to respond to it, get the various versions of the plans out to the outside consultant who was looking at all the technical details, to deal with committee input and citizen input. It's been quite a drill for quite a few months to go through all the little iterations of this odd project on a steep cliff. And I'm glad it's being withdrawn. I understand it's withdrawn without prejudice, and I'm ready to be the liaison to this project again if it ever comes back.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for your good comments to the planning department. So if there's no further comments, David, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter. Aye. Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye, so that's unanimous.
Okay, so the second public hearing The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on June 7, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. remotely by video conference and call-in on the application of NStar Electric, DBA as Eversource Energy and Verizon for a grant of one new pole installation on Arlington Street, westerly side at and opposite of West Road. From computer, enter in the link actonma.gov/meeting/BOS, or from a telephone dial 646-876-9923 and enter in the webinar ID 503-918-785. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. Is Mr. Richard Schiffoni present?
We have a dot user. I believe that's him, but if they could just confirm. You should be able to unmute.
This is Christine Crosby from Eversource.
Okay, Ms. Crosby, please go forward.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, we are petitioning the town for a grant of location for a new pole on Arlington Street in Acton. And it's pole number 2/79A. And the purpose of the new pole would be to provide the new electric service for the Douglas School, the new school that's at 75 Spruce Street.
Sure. Okay, are there any questions or comments from board members before we take public comment? Okay, are there any public comments, Matt?
I don't see any hands up at the moment.
Okay, so do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, hand just went up.
Okay, sure.
This is going to be from, I believe it's Tara, but it is a call-in user, so you can let us know who you are.
Sure. Tara, please.
Sorry, I was hitting *6 instead of *9. Yeah. So my question is this going to have any kind of wireless antennas like 5G, or please tell me what's going on this pole? Thank you.
Ms. Crosby?
It's going to be the typical overhead wires for the primary and secondary service. The wires that you normally see out in the street, and it will provide the overhead wires will go up that private road, that roadway that leads into the property of the school. And everything else will be done on private property, the school property.
Thank you very much. I was just making sure, because 5G requires a whole other process, and there's a lot of towns objecting to it for grounds of impact to young infants' brain function and stuff like that. So thank you very much. I have no opposition.
Okay, thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Matt, are there any other public comments?
I don't see any hands up right now.
Okay, so thank you. So, being no further board comments or public comments, will someone move to close the public hearing?
So move.
Joan moves. So is there a second? Second, David. Okay, David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter? Aye. Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I say aye, so unanimous to close the hearing.
Okay, so do I have a motion granting Eversource Energy and Verizon the installation of one new pole on Arlington Street, westerly side at and opposite of West Road?
So move.
Joan
Second.
moves, David seconds. Any further comments from board members? Okay, so David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter? Aye. Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye, so unanimous approval of the bond.
Before we move into sewer commissioner business, if we might just take the 9 consent items at this point. So, consent item 16, approve amended meeting minutes April 5, 12, 26, and May 3.
I'd like to hold that.
Hold it. Hold the whole article. Hold the.
Well, I think it's just one point. I just have a comment on the May 3rd.
Okay. Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. 17, accept Kelly's Corner right-of-way acquisition, 253 Main Street. 18, accept Kelly's Corner right-of-way acquisition, 292 Main Street. 19, approved request for use of roads in Acton, bike, MS, Minuteman Ride, National Multiple Sclerosis Society, Greater New England Chapter, September 18, 2021. 20, accept gift Recreation Department for $25 from Gene Jones Chen to be used for constructing a dog park in Acton. 21, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Daphne Erickson, Narrow Park, June 19, 2021. 22, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Judith Carlo, Narrow Park, August 21, 2021. 23, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Catherine Narinian, Narrow Park, July 25, 2021. 24, one-day alcoholic beverage license, David Ruger, Narrow Park, July 18, 2021. 25, multiple one-day alcoholic beverage license, Boston Events, Narrow Park, June 23, June 30, August 6, August 13, August 21, August 28, and September 17, 2021, requesting any rescheduled concert dates due to weather to be approved from the original dates listed. So do I have a motion to accept consent items 17 through 25 inclusive?
So move.
Joan moves, David seconds. David, thank you. To item 16, approve the amended meeting minutes.
Do we want it?
Do you want to vote first?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. So if we could vote on 17 through 25, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll call the roll.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.
Okay. Thank you. Then, David, you held number 16, which was the approved amended meeting minutes for April 5, 12, 26th, and May 3.
Yes, and I apologize for not catching this when I read through the minutes the first time. But the update in point 1 of the May 3rd meeting says that a suggestion was made for future board members to attend active bystander training. I believe that was part of a petition that was read at the meeting. And so I just believe that petition should be listed in the documents at the bottom of the minutes.
Okay, so we could further amend the minutes too.
So I think we could just, I could move to approve the minutes of April 5th, 12th, 26th, and with the addition of the additional petition document, minutes of May 3rd.
Okay. Is there a second to David's motion?
Second.
Second, Joan. Okay. Then all in favor?
No.
Okay.
I have to call the.
Okay.
Sorry. Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. So our next item as sewer commissioner business, approve operations and maintenance rate for fiscal year 2022. John? Or Steve Barrett?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like Steve Barrett to join us for this conversation, for this presentation, and provide some information to the board. But if you recall, I believe it was 2 meetings ago, we had a presentation on the kind of the status of the wastewater system and some of the rationale for the rate setting that we're recommending tonight. So if I could leave it to Steve from that point to tell you the rest of the story, I think that'd be great.
Great. Steve?
I'm not able to see who's here and who isn't.
So he is there and unmuted, but we're not hearing him.
Matt?
Let me see if I can't troubleshoot. Give it just 1 second. I brought him back, or I put him back down in the audience and brought him back up.
Now he has to unmute again.
There he
There he is.
Hi, Steve.
Good evening.
Oh, he can't hear
All right.
us.
So I think I'm going to deliver remarks as Steve Barrett, or I'll do it myself. This is what Steve would have said. And if you can join us in the meantime, Steve, please do. The purpose of this agenda item tonight is to ask for the sewer commissioners to vote on the FY22 sewer billing rate, which is referred to as the O&M rate. Operations and maintenance is the rates, is the services that the ratepayers are paying for. The town is providing sewer for 20 years to the community.
Hey, will do, Dave.
There he is. Steve.
Welcome aboard.
I think we can hear him. He can't hear us.
All right, Steve.
Take me a minute, Dave.
So, Steve, we can hear you now, but I don't think you can hear us, so I'm just going to keep going. So, again, we have about 11% of the town. If you look at the total households, 11% of the town is part of our sewer system. That's about 725 customers. The school district is a big customer, and the plazas in Kelly's Corner are also pretty big customers.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Maybe we can we mute him? Okay, thanks.
Here is muting.
Our billing uses winter rates, so that when we bill people for sewer, we consider what they did for winter water usage to understand which rate class they should be in. We get these readings from the water district. It's another example of how we collaborate with the district on certain things. So in terms of why we need a rate increase, if you look at the history of the last few years, we actually haven't had an increase in 2 years. And we try to hold increases anywhere that we can, but we need to use this funding to operate the plant and all the collection systems. We pay about $630,000 a year to operate the system. And if the board approves the recommendation from the finance director and me, I guess, the increase will result in an FY22 annual bill of approximately $845, which is an average increase of about $2 per month to ratepayers. So in the packet provided with this meeting, there was the exact rate structure that we are proposing. If you look at currently, we have 3 rates: residential, commercial, industrial. And we'd like to have the residential be 0.1327 cents per cubic feet, commercial to be 0.1887 cents per cubic feet, and industrial to be the same as that at 0.1887 cents per cubic feet. This is a 2.5% increase in the sewer O&M rate over last year, which again, that rate had been held for 2 years prior to this. Are there any questions for us on this matter?
Questions from board members? Jim?
How has the apparent withdrawal of the Powdermill apartments from affected the financial model? And does that affect the rates this year, proposed rates for next year?
The apartments haven't been withdrawn, so that's not a scenario that we've just really considered yet. The schedule's been delayed, but it's still on schedule. It's still going to happen.
Okay, that's a point of view. Thanks.
Okay. Other questions or comments from board members? Are there any comments from the public?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay. So do I have a motion then to approve the operation and maintenance rates for FY22 as follows? Residential, 0.1327 cents per cubic foot. Commercial, 0.1887 cents per cubic foot. Industrial, 0.1887 cents per cubic foot.
So moved.
Joan moves. Who seconds? Dean seconds. Okay. Any further comments from board members? So David, if you please call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So that's
Okay.
unanimous.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. The next item, we're into new and special business, is approved letter of support for MassWorks grant proposal. John, please.
Thank you. This is another item which we included in the packet. We are applying for a planning and technical assistance grant through the MassWorks program. As you recall, we recently received a large construction grant for $2.75 million. This is an additional grant focused on Great Road, and we're seeking $100,000 to help with complete streets and other transportation improvements to help us design those improvements for the Great Road corridor. The application was actually due on Friday, and so we are asking for this letter of support, and if the board supports it, we will send it to the granting agency and let them know that their support for this. So this is part of the state's one-stop application process that you remember the Lieutenant Governor mentioned when she was out here in a few weeks ago, where they've streamlined the process for applying for grants. It still takes a long time, and but we have a lot of good help and a lot of good staff to help get this thing done. So if there's any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, this letter has been drafted to come from the chair on behalf of the board, I believe, or we can change it any way you'd like if you haven't want it to be written differently.
Okay. Okay, are there any questions or comments? Jim?
I'm very much in favor of this application and this letter. I would say not to suggest a change at this late date, but that just to note that when we're talking about supporting the existing property owners and businesses, we should also include supporting the residents there, many of whom are not property owners.
Okay. Any further comments? David?
Yeah, I would just like to move that we authorize the chair to sign this letter.
Second.
Second. Any further comment? Would David please call the roll?
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.
Okay, thank you. The next item 8 is presentation of proposed low-income community solar program, and I believe, Jim, that's your presentation. So,
Yeah, I'm going to be introducing a couple of other speakers who are going to get into the details, but this is related to the warrant, and I guess I should say for Matt's benefit, if you end up finding Brian Copperell and Annie Joan of Sincarfa on the guest list, it would be great to bring them in. But in the meantime, I can give a little bit of background. So this is related to warrant article 16, authorizes solar contract for a low-income community shared solar facility. And tonight we're introducing you to details that won't be in the warrant article. The warrant article just gives the town meeting permission to the board and the manager to work out this agreement. But we wanted to have you understand the emerging agreement so that we would all be prepared to discuss it in more detail, assuming that the vote goes okay at town meeting and the details get worked out. So this is about an arrangement that will give a substantial benefit to most low-income electricity customers in Acton. And so the outcome is straightforwardly positive, but there are a lot of details and jargon along the way. So let me act as a little bit of a dictionary, and then you can get into the details. So you have your Eversource bill, and you'll remember that there are supply rates and transmission rates. Supply rates is you're charged by the electricity supplier. It used to be in the old days that was always the same as the transmission supplier. It was always Eversource. Now there's competitive electricity supply, so those are different. And in fact, the transmission rates are now the total transmission rates are fairly similar to the total supply rate. So you're only paying half of the money you pay to Eversource on that bill is going to Eversource for transmission, and the other half is going to the supplier. Part of those transmission charges include a little conservation fund payment, which is used for various renewable energy and conservation programs. And that'll come up in a couple more definitions. You have rates. R1 is the most common rate. R3 for residential is if you have all electric heating, because that's, all electric baseboard heating is so awful that they have to reduce the rate to keep people using it at all. Then I'm going to talk about subsidized electricity rates. So these are for households that are on any one of a number of means-tested programs like subsidized housing or school lunch program or food stamps. Households can apply for one of these Eversource subsidized rates where you get a substantial discount off the total of your transmission and supply costs. So there's R2, which is the subsidized version of R1, and R4 is the subsidized version of R3. Then we're going to talk some about Acton Power Choice, which you know about as Acton's electricity aggregation program. So most households, around 85%, are now in one of the three levels of Acton Power Choice: green, standard, or basic, which are the same except they have different levels of renewable energy and cost slightly different amounts of money per kilowatt hour, and people can easily move between them. The next bit of jargon is SMART. That's the Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program. That's how solar developers get paid by the state, or the state hands the money that actually was from one of those conservation funds that we mentioned earlier. Solar developers used to be paid for RECs, renewable energy certificates, and then they were paid for a while in currency in a system called SRECs for solar RECs, all out of that conservation fund. Those were the SRECs in particular was a very generous program. Regulators determined that it was more generous than it needed to be to encourage solar production. So now producers with solar power get paid a base rate plus certain additional extras that are awkwardly called adders. So one adder is for what they call community solar, and a slightly better adder that pays slightly more money to the developer is called low-income community solar. So community solar, that used to be a shared investment. Like in our neighbors in Harvard, Mass, you had a bunch of households getting together to invest in a large solar plant and then getting paid back from the income from that plant. Now it's a way of distributing some of the per kilowatt income in a solar project to people that sign up to be part of such a system, and they get credits on their bills. Low-income community solar, LICSS, is when at least half the money is going to people who are getting one of those subsidized rates that we mentioned earlier. Now, in this part of the state, there are not many community solar systems or low-income community solar systems. The challenge here is that land prices generally make all that extra work and money of tracking the people that are coming and going into the community solar system not worth it for the solar developers. It doesn't make up for the little bit of extra money they get. But now, there are new regulations as of 2020 that let the beneficiaries of a low-income community solar system simply be everyone in a particular aggregation program, like Acton Power Choice, who is on one of the subsidized rates. If they share the benefits equally, that reduces the work a lot for the developer, and it gives us a rare opportunity as Acton to directly support people in Acton that could most use some financial help. There are about 250 households in Acton Power Choice who are low-income rate customers. I suspect we can increase that number a bit once the benefits of this program become well understood. And we did briefly look at the notion of having this be a plain old community solar system. But it turns out that if you have that many customers, each one of us would be getting, pixel dust on our bill, a few pennies. This wasn't worth it. But it'll be a real benefit for the 250 low-income electricity customers. So to get more into the details, we'll hear from Brian Copperell of REM. That's not the band. He will tell you all about REM, and Annie Jung of Sincarfa. So take it away, guys.
Hi there. Jim. This is Annie from Sincarfa. If I can have the ability to share my screen, that would be really great.
You should have it in just a second, Annie.
That's great. And while that's coming up on screen, it's Brian Copperell from REM, local developer of the project. And we'll be real brief. We know there's some Bruins fans out there. So just nice to be back in front of the Select Board again. October the 19th, we came before you to introduce the project. And we've had a very successful run with the Planning Board, and we're grateful for their consideration of the special permit, which was granted in April. And so, Annie, why don't we just... The basic, the site, it's the W.R. Gray site. We don't have to go into that again. It's a 30-acre section on the second slide, Annie. It's in the northeast corner. It abuts the railroad, the Fitchburg line. And as I noted, the special permit was granted by the Planning Board on April the 13th. It's a 5-megawatt facility. It'll generate, round numbers, 9 million kilowatt hours of electricity per annum. It'll be connected to the Eversource grid, and if all goes well, Eversource will, give us by spring of next year permission to interconnect, and then we would have roughly a 5 or 6 month construction period, and hopefully by September of 2022, we'll be in a position to have this project go live. Why don't we go to slide 3? So the SMART program, as Jim pointed out, and really a thanks to Jim for raising his hand back in October when we first discussed this project, because he really pointed out this evolution of the SMART low-income program. And so it is a win-win-win situation. As Jim alluded to, the benefit of additional revenues to the project is obviously a win for the solar developer, our firm, and Sincarfa, ultimately the owner of the project. It's a win for the low-income residents who are members of the Acton Power Choice, and it's a win for the town because there's no fiscal impact. So all the revenue and cost of spreading a benefit comes from the project and the SMART program at the state level, and there's no fiscal impact on the town. There's basically 4 things you got to do, and they're right here on the screen in order to qualify for this benefit. The first is that the benefit has to go through, as Jim mentioned, the Acton Power Choice program, and you got to do it for 20 years. Which is the standard term of all SMART projects. They have a 20-year benefit. So that's something we would have to have an arrangement with the town to distribute that benefit for a 20-year term. The second is that 51% of the subscribers have to be low-income ratepayers. The third is that the energy savings actually have to show up on Eversource bills of those Acton Power Choice customers, and not as cash, right? The DOER wants to make sure that the benefit is used for electricity savings and for no other purpose. And the fourth and last is that the benefit is tied to the energy production of the facility. And that changes, in the summer it's greater, it's 2 to 3 times greater than it is during the winter. It's greater some years than it is in other years when it's hotter and sunnier than it is other years. So there is some variability to this, but that's the nature of solar. But in general, we expect this facility to produce, round numbers, 9 million kilowatt hours per annum, and it will reduce over time as the thing ages, but that's a good number to work with. So if we go on to slide 4, basically the funds are received by Sincarfa from the SMART project. We send based on the energy production each month, we send a pool of money to the Acton Power Choice program. That gets distributed to ratably equally to each of the customers who are signed up. in the Acton Power Choice who are low-income consumers, and they get credited onto their Eversource bills. As you can see in the main part of this slide, the average electric bill for a low-income consumer in Acton is about $1,000, and we expect that this savings will, round numbers, be in the sort of 30 to 40% of their annual costs will be saved through this program. Let's go on to slide 5. Flow chart. This basically captures the overall of the agreement that we would hopefully get approval authorization at town meeting and then ultimately sign if the select board and the town manager sign off on the terms of the agreement. And we've presented that to the town's council, so that's sort of in his or her hands at this point. And this flow chart captures the basic terms. It's a 20-year agreement, as I mentioned, and the Acton Power Choice is the vehicle. You'd enroll all the low-income Acton Power Choice customers in the program. As Jim mentioned, that's about 250 a day. And if the number of low-income residents in the program increases, that just, the pie stays the same, and then it's just a reduced amount per customer, if that all makes sense. And then, the rest of these points are simply that as energy is flowing to the grid, the revenues come to the project and the distribution is made of an energy savings to Acton Power Choice low-income consumers. And then let's go on to slide 6. And so obviously we need to get approval at town meeting. The DOER, the second point is that it's a 20-year term. That's an obligation of the DOER. And so our benefit distribution agreement with the town would call for this Acton Power Choice program to be maintained for a term of 20 years and for this benefit to flow through Acton Power Choice or whatever successor energy aggregation program Acton has for the full 20-year term. And then the third point is, a matter of process. The Acton Power Choice and the town and its administrator, Peregrine, would file for an approval to amend the Acton Power Choice with the DPU. The DPU ultimately is the regulatory agency that authorized Acton Power Choice in the first place, and so it has to approve any amendments to that program, including this one. And at the end of the day, we think it's a meaningful savings for customers, and we think there's going to be demand for that for the full 20 years. So I think with that, again, we estimate round numbers that the monthly benefit would be on the order of $30 per month for each of the customers. And again, that's tied, with variability to energy production, how much solar production there is at the facility each year and again each month. And then also, what is the number of customers who ultimately sign up that will split the pie of pool that's created by that energy production. So I think with that, I'm going to leave it to questions from the board.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions or comments from board members? David.
Yeah, so I just want to understand, this money comes from and is part of the rates that the state establishes for paying solar facilities for their electricity, and if authorized by town meeting, can be distributed to low-income ratepayers in this way. Is that correct?
Yeah, in broad brushstrokes, the overall program for solar is limited, right? It's not an unending or without a cap, right? So you can't just go. So that there's a target number of megawatts of solar in the state, and this 5 megawatt project is part of that overall 3,200 megawatt goal of the state. And so all of those projects theoretically could follow this same regimen program, but there's many different variations of types of solar. And the bottom line is that Eversource ratepayers and Eversource therefore pay this tariff of a base rate plus adders like this one for low-income consumers. And that's a policy choice that the Department of Energy, the DOER, created to support low-income consumers and the benefits of solar, to distribute them to ratepayers equitably. And so, again, Eversource ultimately through its ratepayers is paying for the value of solar energy. And this low-income distribution is just a part of that overall puzzle. Did that answer your question?
I think so. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members? Dean, I don't see you on my screen. Do you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions from the public?
We have one from Franny Osman.
Sure. Franny, please.
Hi, I'm Franny Osman. I'm Half Moon Hill. This is really pretty cool, especially considering I've been involved recently in this group, including Acton Climate Coalition, which has been and Acton Housing for All. Several people from different groups got together, including both candidates for selectmen right now. We're both working on this, which is trying to find ways to help renters have lower utility bills by their buildings being improved through weatherization and other efficiencies. And the challenge, and this looks like a big savings, that would be an ecological savings and a financial savings for them. And the challenge is how to get the landlords and the building owners to make the changes when they don't have the incentive. So I wanted to sort of commend you because this looks like a big chunk of help for low-income utility payers. But I also wanted to ask if you are involved, some of you who are working on this, in that type of work that could advise this group. As we're hoping that a renters group entirely run by apartment dwellers is looking into this. I mean, it's not going to be always the group that started it. It's going to be run by others, hopefully the apartment dwellers. But anyway, my question is whether you can provide help to that effort.
Who was the question to?
The people that are
Annie and Brian.
Mm-hmm. In addition to getting solar energy savings to low-income people, have you worked on other methods of reducing the utility bills of apartment dwellers?
Brian or Annie?
Yeah, I appreciate the spirit. I'm just so you know, I'm here in Belmont, Massachusetts, and I'm on the energy committee of my town, and so I'm actually working with a residential developer of an apartment building with 100 units, and we're trying to do all sorts of things to get them to have a really tight footprint and to do all electric, decarbonized housing, no natural gas, electric heat pumps. I mean, there's a ton of things. And so I appreciate, I just wanted to share that spirit, and I really encourage the town and its new sustainability officer, Andrea. I don't know if she's joined us tonight. She's been a great resource as part of our process. And so the short answer is no. We really are solar developers, and so we can do one thing and do it well, we hope. And so that's our focus. And then I think I would only have two, so I would encourage to reach out to Andrea, and I think if there's ways to, if she could reach out to me, I may know some folks in general who have this kind of background, and so I can't be the facilitator, but maybe they could be helpful to Andrea to be a resource for your Acton residents. The other thing I would just encourage is that members of the community who are on the rate class and they can look at their Eversource bill. Are they R2 or R4 on Eversource? And if they are, then they really should sign up with the Acton Power Choice and take advantage of this program. I would encourage, maybe there's a creative way, Jim, for maybe with Acton water bills or other ways where renters, not just property owners with tax bills, could get notice of this opportunity. And I hope you'll encourage that. And we've got a year and some odd to get it signed up for it to go live. So I think I'll leave it at that. And Franny, I appreciate the spirit of your question. And I hope perhaps with Andrea's facilitation, we could be of a modest resource in that regard in terms of energizing her efforts on your behalf.
Well, thank you. That's really good So I'm learning that from this is the first thing we should do is make sure everybody is signed up for Acton Power Choice.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Fernie, that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments?
We do have 2 more hands up.
Sure.
Symes is the next hand.
Hi, everyone. You hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Speaking as someone who has, put in a cuckoo number of hours promoting Acton Power Choice and the green option in particular, I wonder if the folks from somebody on the town side can just talk a little bit about what the implications are for APC or for any version of a CCA program, given that we're looking at a 20-year term here, and we have not a really great grip on what the energy landscape is going to look like, a decade out. I wonder if anybody could sort of comment on that.
Jim?
Sure. So yeah, the 20-year contract is a challenge, and the lawyers are thinking about, how to activate that, how to make that real. The comment from a Acton Power Choice point of view is that, we've talked about the possibility that there would be times in the future when maybe, the brokers could not find rates that were better than Eversource's rates, so that we would, for a period of time not have a Power Choice program and then re-enter it in the future when we did. But now, if we do go through with this contract, we will always be in a situation where, at least for our low-income customers, Acton Power Choice will be a great advantage to them, because it's the only way to get this, 30 whatever percent it is discount on top of their regular low income subsidized rate discount. So it does give us a motive for continuing the electricity aggregation option into the future, even if we might discourage people that aren't, even if we reach an awful situation in which the brokered rates are not very good, we might end up discouraging people that are not low-income customers from joining Acton Power Choice, but we would still always have, we would still be continuing the Acton Power Choice program. I think the motivation would be very strong to continue it. Does that answer your question, Deborah?
I mean, as much as, there are a lot of unknown, what is it Rumsfeld said? There are a lot of known unknowns, whatever. So as much as we, given as much or little as we know about the landscape going forward, I think that your point is well taken. So to the extent that we can, I think it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Matt, you said there was a second.
Yes, from David Waphoff.
Yes.
Dave, able to speak.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Just a couple from my end, and following on from the last caller is, thinking about this from the town's perspective, are there like minimum usage requirements or generation requirements? Can you talk a little bit about the liability potential to the town? And again, I share the concern that it's a 20-year agreement, and solar generation has relatively been evolving much more quickly than it had in the past lately. And if someone from the town could talk to the liability side and minimum requirements, potential fiscal impact, that would be helpful. I have 2 more after that.
I appreciate that. It's Brian Copper. Why don't I, just to keep it a little simple on Jim, because we've been studying this quite closely. So I think that the key thing is that I think what's really important for everyone to understand is that the SMART program takes the project at its qualification date. And to be qualified under SMART, that happens next year when Eversource gives us our impact study and says, you're good to go, right? You can be interconnected to the grid. And at that point, we'll have our lease with Grace, our permits from the town, and our permission from Eversource. Those are the 3 things you need to qualify. That then timestamps our submission and our qualification, and all of our SMART revenues are literally set down to the, per kWh for the ensuing 20 years at fixed rates. And so now the adder for low-income consumer community solar is settled, and it will not deviate. So that's a beautiful, that's the nice thing about SMART, is it's really predictable. And as a result, we can then offer a settled fixed rate discount, which is what will be agreed on in the signed agreement, which will deliver those savings that we estimated, which again has some variability tied to the amount of energy produced, as well as the number of consumers who dial into this program. And so while there may be variability in the amount of energy, is it 9 million kilowatt hours per annum? Is it 9.5? Is it 8.5? Okay, so that's, and if the system goes down, just, David, just so you know, right, Sincarfa as the owner is going to have, they're going to have 9 million reasons to be on the case and make sure that, the inverters and everything else is working just fine. And if it goes down, they've got a lot of economic incentive to get it right back up again. And as for the town, so that's for us to then generate those 9 million plus or minus kWh and get that savings pool every month, every year for 20 years. And the rate will be all settled. And that's what's going to go in front of the DPU. So that there's no variability there. The other is, if the facility gets destroyed, well, okay, and it's, that's a question for Sincarfa, an economic question at that point, whether or not it would rebuild, right? If a massive 150-year storm takes this thing out, okay, these things are pretty well engineered to be low to the ground, and that's a pretty low risk, and they've got insurance for all that. So, I think that's an open question, but that's not something, that's an act of God. We don't control that anyways. And then from the town's perspective, ultimately, town's not going to pay anything. If the only contingency is if the town says, you know what, we really like this Acton Power Choice, but you know what, we're done with this. And even what Jim said, right? Jim says, oh yeah, no, Jim and I talked about this a bunch of times. And it's like, yeah, you're going to want to keep that Acton Power Choice program going no matter what, because you're going to keep getting these $30 per month for all your consumers. You're going to want to keep that in place. So there's no reason there's no incentive for the town to say, you know what, we're done with this Acton Power Choice. But if you did, then we've got an incentive, a disincentive for you not to do that. And so that's going to be ironed out with the lawyers, right? And that's like, guys, we can't make it free. Then you can destroy this project, right? Year 10, you're like, well, we're done, right? So we're not going to allow you to do that. So we're going to have a little bit of a pain point, but it's pretty reasonable. And we're not going to sit here and hit you with a massive damages clause, right? So there's a very modest negotiated item to close out on that, to give you a disincentive from doing that. And basically, you can manage that risk by also going out to other towns and getting them to substitute for you. But again, as Jim pointed out, the economic incentive is there for you to keep Acton Power Choice in place. And that's the only thing you got to do, is keep that program in place for 20 years, and then this thing just runs.
Maybe just to follow up, just hypothetically, I think Jim had mentioned 250 households are currently qualified for this. How do your economics work if that goes to 150 or 100? Or obviously, that was the other side of it I was concerned about, is what if, these current consumers find alternatives, or just their usage goes down dramatically, or what have you?
Well, I think the first is we have the right to go down to 51%, and I think Annie will tell me it's down to, we need to have 52% just to give a little buffer space, have to be low income, and the other 48% could be non-low income Acton Power Choice customers. So that's one answer. And Annie, there may be some the amount that's allocated. I think we analyzed this, Annie, wasn't it down to round numbers 100? Could get essentially a larger allocation. Is that right, Annie?
Well, we do need about 100 low-income customers. I think that's the 100 number.
Yeah,
we're thinking
that's
of
right.
50% minimum.
Yeah. So, I don't know why that would be a risk for the town. I just don't see that. They've got an economic incentive to A, get the Eversource discount, and B, get this energy savings. They're not going to literally, yes, I suppose there could be other future solar incentives. The history, because we've been in this business for 11 years and going, incentives keep going down over time because they don't want to keep fattening the subsidies for solar. They want to reduce them over time so that it becomes market equivalent. What that means is that I wouldn't expect that future solar programs are going to be anywhere near as attractive as this. So I don't see why there would be a competitive displacement, if you will, from other programs.
Sure. And then, maybe just one final one is,
Sure,
do you currently have this arrangement with any of our nearby communities or towns?
No. So so again, Jim Snyder grant #1, and Paul Gromer, who is from Peregrine, who is the administrator of your Acton Power Choice. They've been great, and this is all literally new from the DOER. So there are no other towns, and so when Acton goes in front of the DPU to get approval to amend its Acton Power Choice, it'll essentially be the first town, and there will be a bunch of others. And Paul Gromer, he's like, yeah, we have other towns who are interested in this same arrangement, and developers, more importantly, who want to put in front of them. And so Acton will be there with other towns in due course, but the DPU has not yet approved any because it's all brand new.
Okay, thank you. Matt, are there any further comments from the public?
There is not.
Okay. Jim, one question. How many people have signed up for Acton Power Choice in town?
It's I think currently, if Paul Gromer is on the line, he would have the exact number, but I think right now we're a little bit north of 80% of Acton's electricity customers are in one Acton Power Choice program level or another.
How about the top one?
So, Acton Power Choice Green?
Yeah.
That's interesting enough at about the same number as the number of low-income subsidized customers. It's about 250.
Okay.
Yeah, we're hoping that has been slowly growing. We hope it to continue to grow.
Okay. So thank you. Okay. Are there any further questions from board members? Okay. So Jim, thank you. Is there any action you'd like us to take tonight, or?
No, this is really just an update so that you and everyone listening could understand the details that would go into this agreement and the parts that will be, and so that Article 16 is the piece in the warrant that will trigger this process to move further. So I just want to make sure everyone knew what was behind all that.
Article 16 is just an authorization to move forward.
Yeah, there it is.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you, Annie.
Jim, thank you very much, and Brian and Annie as well.
Thank you. And Jim, just to close, you're in a position to support this at town meeting. You would be the one presenting, is that right, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll be borrowing a whole bunch from your slides. Thank you.
Bob Knowles and I will be in attendance from REM. It's in person, the town meeting, is that right?
It is. You can be inside or outside, but you have to be in person to vote.
All right. Well,
it will be broadcast over our social media at the same time, so you could watch it remotely.
Okay. If you want us to help you at all in that presentation, you let us know. We'll be there. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank
you. Okay. Our next item, which is number 9, is discuss open meeting law complaint dated May 28th, 2021, and delegate the response. I had been back and forth with town council today, and she reports that there are currently 4 outstanding complaints filed by Stephen Ballard of Boxborough, 3 concerning vague meeting minutes, and 1 on an untimely response. With respect to the minutes, as you recall, Nina had reviewed the minutes, agreed that we could be more specific in the reporting than we as originally drafted and we had approved. The sets of minutes have all been revised, and those 4 amended minutes were approved by the board earlier this evening. I think we could all agree that the minutes could have been more accurate, but I would say that it wasn't an intention. It wasn't intentionally done in a vague manner. One way, to try to influence opinion or the like any way. if anybody has any comments on whether they thought it was intentional or not, please be free to speak now. Okay. David.
I don't have a comment on that. We were going to talk about the specific complaint this time.
Yeah, that's coming up right now, and I have
Okay.
two motions.
And then I'll have
motions
anything right now.
to move it forward.
Okay.
The remaining violation was not providing a written response to Mr. Ballard within 14 days of his last complaint. And town council takes responsibility for that oversight. Although the board did take action in response to the complaint within the requisite time, town council's office did not get the notice letter out to Mr. Ballard or the Attorney General's office until last week. So we, on behalf of the board, we should acknowledge that oversight this evening, and it was not obviously intentional, given that we had responded to the complaint. So I have two motions that were proposed by town council. I'd like to move to instruct town council and the town manager to respond to Mr. Ballard's 3 open meeting law complaints from May 18 and May 19, 2021, by informing him and the Attorney General's office that the minutes from April 12, 26, and May 3 have been revised and approved by the board to reflect additional detail, and that the initial approval of the inaccurate minutes was not an intentional violation of the open meeting law. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Joan. Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, being none, David, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I also say aye, so that's unanimous.
Sure. The second motion is I'd also move to instruct town council and town manager to respond to Mr. Ballard's May 28, 2021 open meeting law complaint by acknowledging the board's error in not providing a timely notice of response to Mr. Ballard and the Attorney General's office. Is there a second to the motion? Second, Joan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being none, David, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Snyder Grant.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Benson.
Aye.
And I also say aye.
Okay, so thank you. So item 10 under new special business is consider voting to end the local state of emergency declared on March 10, 2020, and to end it on June 15th, 2021. So, John.
Thank you. So yes, it was March 17th, a meeting upstairs in this building where the board met for one of the last times in person, maybe the last time in person, I guess, and voted to retroactively declare an emergency locally to align with the date that the governor declared an emergency, which was March 10th of 2020. As mentioned at previous meetings, the governor has announced that the statewide emergency is scheduled to end on June 15th, which is next week. And so the proposal from both me and from the Board of Health and our local COVID team here is to recommend that both the Board of Health and the Select Board vote to end its local state of emergency that was duly entered into and have it aligned with the governor's, which would be June 15th. So the Board of Health is meeting right now virtually and considering the same, I believe there'll be support for it, but I'm asking for yours tonight.
Okay. So is there any discussion?
So moved.
Okay, so the so moved would be to end the local state of emergency on June 15th, 2021, which would also coincide with the ending of the Governor Baker's state of emergency that he declared on March 15th, 2020. So is there a second to Joan's motion?
I'll second.
Okay, David, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Jim?
Yes, so I wonder if John, town manager, could clarify how this impacts committees. I have at least one committee that's very eager to start meeting in person.
That's the next item, is to discuss
Okay,
the
great.
transition to in-person meetings.
Okay, I'll
Okay.
wait on that one.
Okay, so if there's no further comment from board members, David, call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say hallelujah. I mean, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Well done.
Okay. So, John, let's discuss the transition to in-person meetings.
Thank you. As mentioned, there are committees that are ready to start meeting in person again. Unless something changes at the state level, we will all be required to meet in person starting on June 15th. As I think included in the packet is the governor's legislation that the governor's office filed to propose to extend the remote meeting rules that have been used during the pandemic and have them go through September 1st, I believe. There's also other things in there, but so if we find out in the next week that it's been extended, then we can continue to meet remotely. If not, we're ready to have the meeting rooms used like they used to be. I guess what I'd like to ask of the board tonight is, in the scenario that something happens at the state level and we do have an extension for remote meetings, how do you want to handle it? If you remember, as we entered the pandemic, all board and committee meetings ceased, and it was actually this board that approved any board and committee starting to meet virtually. Because if you remember, we had to build the whole infrastructure to do it. We started just with the Board of Health and it was the Board of Selectmen at the time. And then as the Board of Selectmen at the time approved additional meetings, we built our infrastructure, brought Matt Murphy in to help facilitate them, and here we are. So we could do the same thing, kind of roll out of them. We could clean the deck and say everyone has to be in person unless they get permission again. For example, I know the West Acton Citizen Library trustees would like to meet in person, I think this week. And so I told Jennifer that I asked this board tonight if you're okay with it. They were going to meet outside the picnic table. So that's the kind of example of one question. And then, so how do you want to handle all the other meetings and boards and committees?
Dean?
Well, I can't say for the other committees, but the boards and committees that I'm a liaison to pretty much all seem to be in favor of going back to in-person meetings as quickly as possible, noting that usually everybody has a fairly light meeting schedule in July and August. It's probably, we need to, roll it in slowly, we could probably do that, but my sense is that there's a lot of support for going back to full in-person meetings, and starting 15th of June sounds good to me.
David?
Yes, I would like to be able to, for committees to have a choice, but I'd like them to have a pretty limited choice to start, especially small committees, just because of the logistics, to be all remote or all in person. I think if we want to, for the bigger committees where we can handle the logistics eventually, we can have all the members in person and still take, certain participation remotely. But I think that's too much to expect for a small committee meeting in person. So again, I would like to allow I'll just say to start with, all committees to meet all remote or all in person, and with special permission, maybe some kinds of hybrid.
Okay. Jim?
Two thoughts. So the Water Resources Advisory Committee is eager to meet in person. They have their next meeting before the 15th, so if we're going to ask for special permission to meet in person before then, I'd happily add their name to the list. On the other hand, the Commission on Disabilities has been really served well by having remote meetings. It's really allowed people to participate, both members and other volunteers to participate in ways that they couldn't before because they're either have difficulty traveling or they remain in their house or whatever. So for them, I want to be able to provide a solution that allows for ongoing remote meetings as long as possible. I do hear what David's saying about the difficulty of a hybrid solution of, some people being present and some people being remote. So I'm happy to suggest that they wait on that as long as they can continue to meet remotely until we have the technology well in place and the logistics well in place. The other comment I have is that the remote meetings have really transformed the numbers participating as visitors, particularly in our board, but also on other boards. So I do want to make sure we have a solution that allows for remote participation by visitors. I think it's been a great boon.
Joan?
No, I don't have any comment because I won't be here after town meeting.
Okay. Okay, so John, what would be the most sensible and practical thing from your perspective?
So I think that, first of all, if the legislation doesn't happen, then everyone should be put on notice that we're meeting in person only, effective June 15th. If the legislation is approved or something happens at the state level extending our ability to meet remotely and still meet open meeting law requirements, I would suggest we stay status quo, at least through town meeting, unless this board approves another format. And in two cases, I'd request that you approve the West Acton Library trustees to meet outside in person. And it sounds like the Water Advisory Group is requesting the same. And in that case, to select Board Member Martin's point, it would be all in person and not a hybrid.
So I hear you right. What you would, from your perspective, what would be the most practical is from this point forward that the meetings all be in person, unless the governor's legislation to allow remote meetings.
Yes, so I would recommend
by the
that
legislature.
Your staff and technology staff and facility staff are ready to accommodate meetings in person starting June 15th. And so that's the course that we're on. But if there is an extension to the open meeting law exemptions allowing remote meetings, I would recommend that we keep everything status quo, at least through town meeting, and we continue to work on what hybrid or all remote or all in-person meetings look like.
So town meeting's June 21. So did you say we keep the existing remote system in place through that June 21st?
Yes, I would say keep it in place, and if allowed to do so, keep it in place through the rest of the month, essentially.
If the legislation passes.
And if not, we'll be ready to start meeting in person.
Okay, David.
I wanted to ask the manager why he thinks it would be a problem to allow boards and committees to meet in person at their choice this month.
That's I don't have a problem with that. I think rather than trying to decide right now which ones will and won't be, there's only been two that requested to meet in person. At this point, as I said, we're ready to have people meet in person from a public health standpoint and from a facility standpoint. So if the board would like to allow that starting June 15th, either way, I'm comfortable with that as well. I was just trying to keep it a little bit simpler.
You know, if the manager doesn't have a big objection, I think it would be good rather than waiting for the legislation to expire or not be enacted and to have a flood of, you know, everybody switching in the same instant by law, that it makes sense to allow boards and committees to choose themselves at their next meetings whether they want to meet by, you know, remotely or in person. But I would, you know, I'd be prepared to make a motion if you want me to make a motion in a minute. But I would say that the meetings would have to be all remote or all in person, and in the future we could make exceptions.
So a committee would, given the option, you could either meet in person or meet remotely under your suggestion.
That's the way I would start it, because I think the logistics of a hybrid, I think, well, first of all, the logistics of a hybrid with some members present and some not, the members that are not are the poor cousins, right? They it's hard to speak up, you know, and stuff when you're remote and most of the members are in person. So I think that's very awkward, and I think we need to think through that before we allow that at all. I'm very sympathetic to allowing the public to participate remotely for an in-person meeting, but for a small board or committee, that is a lot of logistics that I think we need to take time to consider before we do. I think it will be practical for meetings like this one, where we have support and everything, to allow to eventually allow remote participation, even with all the members present. But I think we should start, you know, each committee should be able to choose all remote or all in person.
Jim.
So David, my concern here is that we do have state law that allows, as long as a quorum of members are present, there can be remote participation for specific reasons, disability, travel. There's a small list that's allowed, and I would be unhappy if the proposal you're describing would override that. In particular, in the case of the Commission on Disabilities, it would be painful.
David?
So in the first line of my little chicken scratch here, it says pursuant to all state laws. But in that remote thing, it was not a Zoom meeting typically in the past, right? Someone would dial in and they'd be on a speakerphone. Now, you know, we have to figure out the details. Of course, we cannot violate state law. So I would say, but we would not have mixed at this point participation by the public with local members or something like that. If the Commission on Disabilities or any other committee wanted to meet all remote, in my proposal, that would be fine. Or if they wanted to meet in, you know, room 126, that's fine, right? So that's what I'm in favor of.
Dean?
Yeah, I support David in his motion. I think it's a good idea. Obviously, you know, we're in uncharted territory here. We don't know what the state's going to do. Certainly, we'll be reconsidering this, but I think that David's push towards simplifying things and either all in person or all remote makes a lot of sense. I'd support him in that.
Okay. Are there further comments? So David, we have a motion?
Chair. No,
yes,
I would support the town manager's recommendation that we continue to meet this way until town meeting.
Meet remotely until town meeting, is that?
Yeah.
Is that what your recommendation, John? I thought.
Yes.
Let's.
Generally, if allowed to, if something happens at the state level that allows us to continue meeting remotely, my recommendation would be we just do that for at least through town meeting, except for any boards or committees that you say can meet in person.
Okay, so your suggestion is we continue to meet remotely through town meeting with exceptions granted by the board for committees that wish to meet in person. Is that it?
Yes.
David?
I just want to say, well, first of all, I like my proposal better, but there are members of the public who also would like to weigh in. I don't know if you want to take comments on this issue or not.
Matt, are there people wishing to weigh in?
We do have quite a few hands up.
Okay.
I can start taking them if you would like.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to apologize for butchering this name. Himaja Najridi, you should be ready to speak.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to know that obviously we are going to move forward with state compliance and making sure that we adhere to those policies. But just also wanted to note that if we do move in person, to be mindful that a lot of people still don't feel comfortable being out in person, kind of quote back to normal as we've done before. So making sure that chairing or that seating is spaced out, making sure that there's sanitizer, making sure that there isn't any crowding going on, just to make sure that if we are providing in-person experiences, kind of moving forward, that we're doing so in a mindful way that is taking into consideration people's hesitancy kind of coming out of the pandemic. Thanks.
Thank you, Himaja. Matt? Others?
Yes, next up is going to be Tara.
Tara, please.
Hi, this is Tara. I agree with Himaja. Thank you very much for offering that with her public health background. And I like Joan's idea because the town staff is trying really hard to get ready for town meeting. And so if we suddenly change all that around, everybody's meeting in different ways and keeping track of that and trying to staff this and that and trying to open up buildings, et cetera, that's a great burden, I think. But I enjoy the remote meetings, and I hope that you find some kind of hybrid. It's a saving on carbon footprint if we aren't having an electric car or can't walk to town hall or bike. So I respect the idea of having one or the other for some time, but the amount of participation that has happened with the remote is just incredible. You know, you have 10 times the number of people on these calls. Usually I would sit in the audience all by myself, maybe two other people. And now, and it's like 10, 30, 50 people. It's really great to see. And so I don't want to lose that participation. And so I feel like as much as fun as it would be to be in the same room with everybody, I feel like as we want to be an inclusive society, that finding a way to have the ability, especially for the smaller communities, I understand that hearings, it might be easier to have it in person, but you lose that ability to have everybody participate when you only have it in person. And the larger committees have the Acton TV, which is great, right? Planning Board, FinCom, BOS. So, that's not as important. The call-in would be great, obviously. That you can't offer that with the Acton TV. But for the smaller committees, I can go to these meetings and watch one for half an hour and go to another one, and we wouldn't be able to get to those at all. By the time you drive someplace else, it's already over. So I hope you go to a hybrid to increase inclusivity, and I hope you give John a break and stick with the remote until after town meeting. Thank you.
Further public comment, Matt?
Yes, Deborah Symes is up next. Deborah, you should be able to speak.
Thank you, Matt. Quickly, this is probably for John. John, when things do transition to in real life meetings, have you talked with the Board of Health or the health director about, pardon me, given that there are still unvaccinated people, and I know rates are low, blah, 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 but have you talked at all about about requiring, if we can even do that legally, I have no idea, requiring that unvaccinated people wear masks?
The Board of Health earlier this year voted to align all of its restrictions with the states. So we would just follow the state guidance for as it applies to the situation for each meeting.
Okie doke, thanks.
Are there any further public comments, Matt?
There are two more hands.
Sure.
Franny Osmond is up next.
Yes, hi. Now that we made the rooms in town hall better, apparently, I just want to confirm, during the pandemic, you put electronic systems into them so that you can have Zoom meetings in the meeting rooms. Is that correct?
Yes, one of the many things we did with CARES funds was we equipped most of the conference rooms in this building and several other buildings to be Zoom rooms. I'm in a Zoom room right now, which if there was 5 people at the table with me right now, we could all be talking to you and the camera would follow the person that was talking. It works pretty well, and the main meeting room upstairs is set up that way. We're still testing it, but we will be ready very soon. So yes, we do have the technology to do a hybrid meeting, but it is additional level of work. You basically need someone that's not on the committee to run the system, which we're fortunate to have IT support, several, but not every committee that meets has that.
Okay. Well, I found that it was pretty easy to learn how to facilitate or lead a Zoom meeting during the pandemic. I think that we had so much ingenuity and creativity during the pandemic, and I don't want to suddenly turn into being no people. Like David said, when you were calling in, it was sort of like, well, can't hear us, sorry, or we can't hear you, sorry. And I think we need to change that. I actually don't see the advantage of making up one rule or another, all remote or all not. I think we should be creative and have combined most people there, but allow people to, with complete respect and inclusion, participate remotely. The remote participation hasn't been that good. Information is power, and the board and most committees held all the power, being able to see who was in the room, and other people couldn't, as I've mentioned before. They couldn't see who's raising their hand. They couldn't see who had arrived or left. And so I think it would be important to change it to a meeting format where everyone is on the same level field of visibility. If you're worried about people doing untoward things, they can come to town hall and do untoward things also. We can't see the people who drift away due to the lack of ability to participate. Being involved in transportation, council on aging, and the Commission on Disabilities, I very often saw people choosing to back away from civic participation when they stopped driving at night. I saw people who were able to attend who were immunosuppressed and previously hadn't been able to, and for other reasons that they hadn't been able to participate. Or before the pandemic, people who stopped. So I really think it's not just Commission on Disabilities, it's all the commissions. I highly urge us to allow some sort of hybrid participation, and just, it might be a little hard, but we'll manage, and I think it's worth it.
Thank you, Franny. And there's one more citizen.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Kara Lafferty.
Kara, please.
Hi there. Thank you for your time. Kara Lafferty, Neshoba Road. I echo what Franny and Timija have shared, both that and specifically, I think that a certain population, the population of parents with young children who had previously been disenfranchised from participating in these types of meetings at kind of bedtime hours. Now, with this electronic feature of being able to log on, you can pop your earbuds in and you can nurse a baby and put them to sleep while kind of, retaining information that you're hearing from these different meetings. So I would very much encourage the board and kind of go with what the town manager has offered and allow for remote participation from the public, at least. I understand that the actual committee members, and I sympathize with David's point of being the poor cousin, not having an appropriate voice at the table to make these decisions. I understand that is complicated, and I wouldn't want to comment on that aspect of it. But for purposes of public participation, I would suggest that the board encourages that to keep happening, particularly allowing the population of parents with young kids to participate. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Carol. So, Jim?
I'm thinking about what people have said, and I'm thinking about both what board members have said about, and the town manager has said about, staff time, especially at this crunch time leading up to town meeting. So my thought, thinking about being the liaison to the Commission on Disabilities, for example, is to say that if we're going to want to have remote participation or or a hybrid with a quorum present, we're going to need to be on our own for at least a little while in setting that up. If members want to do that, we may need to be our own IT departments as far as figuring out how to use a laptop to do that, and how to bring people in and out. We can't really call on staff at this point to help us, hold our hands through learning the new systems yet. Maybe eventually, because I agree, we have this great equipment. It's worth it. It's worth it to figure out how to make it work. But in the meantime, I think we're gonna, if there are committees that want to proceed, they're gonna have to be on their own.
So, Dean?
Yeah, a couple of points. One is as I understand the motion from David, each board and committee would be able to opt whether they wanted to go either remote or in person. And I think, the chair and the folks on those committees can assess, their comfort level of meeting in person and also their technical abilities. I mean, we've got some boards and committees that frankly have a hard time keeping all their paperwork squared away. And, I'd hate to dump them on them that, okay, now you got to be the Zoom masters as well. So I think, the suggestion that David made, each board and committee has to look at their own capabilities and make that decision. And I think it'll be a good transition that we can start soon. The other things going forward that will be something for the next board to discuss is that, eventually the CARES money is going to give out and the additional federal money is going to give out. And at some point, with all thank you to Matt Murphy and the rest of the folks that have helped us through this, but eventually, we can't afford to keep extra Zoom people on forever. And I think, looking at the situation, for instance, that the school committee ran into, these things can go awry. So I'm still very much an advocate for moving to in-person meetings as much as we can. So I'll continue to support what I understood to be David's suggestion.
Okay, David? You got to.
Thank you. I know people want to have lots of hybrid meetings, but I'll say that I worked at IBM for a long time. Virtually every meeting at IBM is remote. And when we have it partially local, partial remote, it is extremely difficult. It requires a lot of attention to make it fair for the people who are remote from a site. And I want to make it also clear that, going forward, I would love to have as much remote participation by non-members as we can manage, right? But through training people to use Zoom, through whatever means we can, I think it's great that there have been more people involved. I do not think we should encourage having members be some remote, some local. I think that's a very difficult situation and very difficult for the remote members. I think the members should be all in one place, and over time we should transition to as much remote participation for a local meeting as we can. I'm happy to go ahead with my motion. I also understand where the town manager is, and I'd be happy if, if people really want to delay this decision till July, we could do that too.
Yeah, let me say this. What John's suggesting is let's keep it the way we're doing through the end of town meeting. That'll be on June 21st or June 22nd at the latest. And then there'll be the new board, and the new board could determine next steps. You'll have to call a special meeting of that board, the new board, because they're not scheduled to meet again until July 12th. And I think, by town meeting, I think we'll have some idea of whether, governor's proposed legislation makes it through the legislature. So would you, to make it, best for John, who's got to make this all work, could we adopt his suggestion and just keep the present, remote meetings, through town, through town meeting, with the understanding you're going to have to meet right after town meeting on next steps? Jim.
Just with remembering that if the legislature doesn't do anything, we are by default forced into a situation of having full in-person meetings starting on the 15th.
Yeah. Dean?
Yeah, I understand the situation, what you're suggesting, and I certainly sympathize with the town manager. I'd be willing to take David's suggestion and make the conversion over on the 21st of June. We've got a quorum right now of the new board, so I think we should make the decision now. So that, then when we get our two new members on, we can always make some other decisions, but I don't really see a reason to delay this any longer than that. I'm sympathetic to the run up to town meeting, so if David wants to amend his motion and go for June 21st, that's fine, or not.
Would you consider that, David?
Sure, and I could probably work that into my motion here if we want to do that. I mean, we can discuss it, and we can amend it again or whatever we want.
Do you want to break for two or 3 minutes so you can work on your motion and?
Sure.
You got it right?
Sure.
All right, so let's, it's 9:07. Why don't we come back in 5 minutes?
Okay. I'll be ready.
All right, thank you. I guess we're back in a minute. Okay, we're all back. We're closing in at 9:12. So, David, you have a motion.
I do. I move that within the bounds of state law, as of, I should say, I'm doing this the Wednesday after town meeting, just in case we have a two-night town meeting. Okay, I move that within the bounds of state law, as of 23 June 2021, boards and committees may choose for meetings to be held all remote or all in person, and permission for remote public participation to local meetings may be granted by the select board on a case-by-case basis.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any further board discussion? Jim?
I'll be asking for permission from the board to allow remote participation for the COD.
To an otherwise local meeting.
Yes, if we end up having otherwise local meetings, yeah.
Okay, is there any further board comment? Okay, then David, please call the roll on your motion.
Okay, sorry, I gotta get my paper. Okay, Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye.
Okay, we're in business. Well done. Thoughtfully done.
Can I have can I also ask if the board plans to meet in person as of July or as of that date? So because
as of the 23rd?
Right, because we would have to decide either tonight or a week from tonight if on the 12th of July we're planning to meet in 204 or still meet remotely.
Dean?
I certainly would be very much in favor of meeting in person the 12th of July.
I think that's good too, but I don't think we need to vote on that. We can just ask the town manager to do that, right? If that's okay with the town manager.
I think within your motion you can do that.
We just have to decide what we want to do and just let the town manager know it.
Okay. Like our meeting next week will be remote.
Okay.
Continue as we have. And then were there, Dean?
Yeah, I think as far as that meeting on July 12th, with the changeover of the board, but we will not have had a chance to reorganize. So I'll be sort of the last surviving vice chair. So I would certainly speak with the town manager and ask and make sure that we could do it in person. And then decide at that point where we go forward. But I would certainly push that it be an in-person meeting at Town Hall.
But first we have to vote on this motion.
We did.
We just did.
It passed.
It passed.
Are you clear, John?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for putting that together, Dave.
The next item was to discuss a request for use of space in front of the Memorial Library for a Pride display. John?
Thank you. Yes, from time to time, there requests come through to my office, usually through facilities for use of the town common or areas, public areas in front of the main buildings here in the center for different things. And in the past, I've sort of handled it at an administrative level. I think maybe the natural gas public art display, I believe I brought to the board. If not, I should have.
Oh, you did.
Okay, good. In any event, I think there's not a specific policy that I'm able to find that tells me how to answer these questions. So I'd rather just bring it to the board. There's no issue from the staff perspective for what's being proposed here. There was some question about, well, you know, they appear to want to put something around a tree. Is that going to damage the tree? The tree warden said no. The library staff doesn't have an issue with it. So no issue from staff. I just wanted to get into the practice of bringing all of these to the board going forward until there's more specific policy direction.
Okay. So is Joan?
Yeah, move to approve.
So it's moved to it would be moved to approve the request for tree wraps on the Memorial Library lawn in observance of Gay Pride Month.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So is there you've moved that motion?
Yes.
And is there a second?
Sure, I'll second
And
that.
the second is Jim. Okay. Any further discussion, David?
So it wasn't clear for me from what the town manager said. Are we working on more detailed guidelines for this kind of thing? Do we? I wonder if we, need guidelines as to. I mean, I'll be happy to vote for this, but I'm wondering if we need guidelines for what we accept and what we don't accept.
John, you want to comment first?
Sure. I mean, if there was a policy in place that said what was approved and how it would be approved, then it would simplify the process. And absent of that, I'll just continue to bring it to the board.
Yeah, but I think it's even tough for us. I mean, I thought Dean came up with a very good policy on flag raising. I think this is similar to that. It's not exactly the same, but I'm thinking that going forward, it would be nice to have a policy as to what kind of displays. Do we allow big flashing lights or what are the borders of what we allow and don't allow?
Dean?
Yeah, along the same lines, and I think it's a good thing to probably kick around with a new board because it'll probably take a few iterations. But I like the idea of having a designated area where we'll allow any kind of displays within reason. I think the big issue that we had in the past was things being done on the Monument Triangle, which is actually legally graveyard. But I think, an area of sort of public display and public speech, I can't think of a more appropriate area than right in front of the Memorial Library. That piece of lawn actually is part of the town common, but certainly it's, I think it's appropriate. It's a contained space. I remember back years ago going to a Cape Canaveral and they had a designated area there in the middle of the parking lot where anybody that wanted to come out there and make a speech, they could and say whatever you wanted. And then if you went outside that space, then there were issues. But I think, making that as sort of the speaker's corner or the display corner, like, going forward, once we set a policy, might work out well.
Okay.
So the motion is to approve.
Yes. And if there's no further comment, David, please call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
I love this idea. Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye.
Okay. Item 13 is review the 2021 annual town meeting articles and consider recommendations. John, where do we stand at the moment? We got on Friday night the latest draft of the warrant. The warrant, I believe, went out to the printer today. The warrant was posted by 6 this evening.
Yes. So the warrant as published in the packet, with the exception of a few maps being updated and a more descriptive summary being added to Article 10, I believe remained as you saw it in the packet. Is Mark Hall, would you be able to actually just confirm what else changed since it was published in the packet?
Yeah, I think you're right, John. I think that's about it. Just some other technicalities.
Okay, and Mark, actually, while you're here, which articles still require a recommendation from the select board?
I don't have the warrant in front of me, but I know the sewer enterprise fund was one article that's in the consent section. That Article 10 that you just mentioned, I believe both the board and the FinCom deferred. That's all I can think of at the moment.
Well, let's take a moment and just get this right. Mark, what you're saying is Article 10, the sidewalk acquisition, and Article 28. That's a consent article for the sewer enterprise fund.
Those were both definitely deferred. I can't think of another one off the top of my head.
Okay, so why don't we start with 10, Article 10, and that's the sidewalk acquisition 78 Taylor Road.
I recommend this.
And that would be on page 53. And
this has been a discussion at the Transportation Committee a number of times.
Okay. And David, this is your article?
Yeah, yes, but this is the first time seeing the wording because the wording was just recently finished. But I will study up on this article before town meeting. But I think the overall idea is pretty simple. It's to acquire an easement for the sidewalk at 78 Taylor. And there was a lot of discussion about how that would interact with school district land for a while and things like that. But I think that's not, as I understand it, not legally possible for the district to make that trade. And so this is actually just kind of, and the town manager, correct me if I'm wrong, this looks to me to be kind of a normal sidewalk easement.
Yes, the only thing that's not normal about it is that we have to work with the school district and speak special legislation to allow them to grant us the easement. Other than that, we're just simply getting enough room along the roadway to build a sidewalk. And this article, prepared by council, is the vote that we need to ask of our town meeting to take the next step in this process, which has been a very complicated sidewalk planning and acquisition is always complicated. This has been a particularly complicated one, but this apparently is the answer to get us there.
Okay.
I move that we support this article.
Recommend the article.
Recommend.
And is there a second? David?
A second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion from board members? Okay, then David, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye, so we unanimously recommend Article 10.
Okay, so then let's move to Article 28. That's the Sewer Enterprise Fund, and that would be on the draft warrant that was sent out Friday night, page 76. Okay, that's a consent article. I was overseeing that. And, you know, what we are, I guess the motion is that we're, have the town raise $1,870,421 from department fees, transfer $268,000 from retained earnings, and appropriate $2,138,963 for the purpose of operating the system. Are we good on that to recommend?
Move to approve. Move to recommend.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Dean. Okay, if there's any further comment? Okay, David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye, so we unanimously recommend Article 28.
Okay, so our big piece of work now is item A in Article 4. That's the Public Works Facility and Transfer Station design. And John, in an email to us, set out several options. Jim and David and I were at the FinCom meeting and heard their reaction to it last Tuesday night. I think we're going to have to step back. Dean, would you take it from here?
Yeah, you know, obviously the timing is bad on this. I think the number in the feasibility study of, you know, neighborhood of $30 million is probably a very realistic number for what we need to do there. But obviously it's a big jump from what was in the capital improvement plan. We need to get a lot more clarity on this. We need to build some support for it. People need to understand it better. My recommendation is that we pull the entire amount and zero out for A. That would be our recommendation. And then I would hope to come back to the new board and try to set construction of this building as a goal, whether long-term or short-term, and get a building study committee going in probably in the summer or early fall, and move ahead with it and come back hopefully next year. So I would move that we not recommend any funding at all under item 4A.
Second. So that, I'm sorry. So okay, is there a second? Okay, so it's I think it's two pieces of funding. The $1 million comes out, and that would make the total of Article 4 $1 million less at $2,115,740. And then also from the almost $214,000 in interest costs for the next year, that number should come down to reflect the fact that the transfer station, that the design, Public Works design is out. David?
Yeah, I was wondering if we need some money here to be able to flesh out the design a little bit further and to answer some of the questions that have come up. Or are we just putting the whole thing on ice until some future discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Dean?
Yeah, I understand from a discussion I had with the town manager that there is a very modest amount of money still available, left over from the initial study. So I think we've got a little bit of money that we can pursue this with, and he seemed comfortable that that sum would be enough. And if it looks like it's not going to be enough, we can always reverse course later. But I think it's too much speculation on trying to figure out what would be a good number to put in there. So I think it's cleaner just to get the whole thing out and rely on this small amount of leftover money. I think the manager can probably speak to that better than I can.
John?
Thank you. Yes. So we hired a consultant to do the feasibility study, and there is still scope left in their contract, which we can hold. A part of the scope was to do more public forums, which we were going to do this summer, and we can probably just press pause on that whole thing and see how the board wants to do the prioritization this summer. But yes, there is funding available to do some additional analyzing of the options available to us. But there's also, I think, a lot of work that we just didn't have time to complete in just understanding the feasibility. They put a lot of work into that feasibility study, and it's 100 plus pages of data that I think we really need to spend more time with. So I would be supportive of this concept of doing that and then coming back next year or as soon as we can.
Okay. Jim?
Just curious how this works technically. Do we change the motion, the language of the motion to change those numbers?
So what we would do, the warrant's already printed and shows the board recommending all four components of Article 3. So what we'll do is, as we prepare the final motions, we can have this, we can address it in the motion. Just say, move that the board not, we'll figure out exactly what to write. But yes, the mechanics are handled in the motions, and that can be communicated to town meeting that night or even beforehand.
And where would the $213,000 first year interest figure be adjusted down?
So the way that would work is that in Article 4, we were going to ask town meeting to appropriate and authorize us to borrow $1 million and to appropriate from stabilization around $81,000 to pay for the first year debt service. So we will not do either of those things. And so that there would be that much less that we're appropriating from stabilization this year.
Okay, stabilization was in Article 3. Where in?
So we were going to appropriate from reserves. I should be more specific. To cover the $81,000 first year debt service. And
wasn't it $213,000 was the debt service on the?
That's for all four projects.
All four. So it's 81 is attributable to.
Yes.
Okay. Just it was explained to me once, but I forgot. Where in the warrant is the ask for the $213,000?
So it would be in Article 4. Town meeting would make a motion to appropriate $1 million, authorization to borrow $1 million, and to appropriate for the borrowing costs $81,000 from reserves.
And the specific number of the interest would be spelled out in the motion. And it would be basically $214,000 less $81,000.
Yes. So yes, for each project, we would be allocating a portion of that 213 as part of the motion when we request approval of that project. So yes, in this case, we wouldn't be asking for the $81,000 at all, and then the other amounts we would be asking for as those projects are being requested to be approved.
Okay. Are we all clear? Okay, so Dean, you had a motion?
Yeah, I would move that the board recommends not to proceed with Article
4A.
4A at this
Not to
time.
recommend.
Not to recommend.
Second.
Okay, second, Joan. Is there any further discussion? And David, call the roll, please. John, you had a question?
And just for the way it looks historically, is there a difference between saying not recommending and just saying decided to defer or something? It's not that you don't want to do the project necessarily, you just don't want to do it right now. Or I don't know if that's worth mentioning.
Would you? Well, I think Dean would have to offer an explanation in his comments.
Yeah, I would ask to pass over. I think that's the wording we've used in the past, that we pass over section Article 4A. Or take no action.
It'd be take no action if it was a whole article, but here we're just not recommending this part. And that was the wording that, the wording that is in the motion on the table is the same wording that the Finance Committee moved. But I do think we need to be clear in town meeting that it's just for this town, it's for right now. And I think people are used to that. I mean, there are other articles that have come up that we didn't want to take action on at that town meeting.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
We could just start off the motion by saying that move that item A of Article 4 is hereby deleted, and then take the appropriate action on B, C, and D.
That would be what happens that night. Right. What you're proposing to do that night.
Right.
Or take no action on 4A.
Well, tonight we should say we're deferring.
Deferring means that we decide usually at town meeting.
At town meeting. Well, what we're...
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joan.
Well, I think taking no action looks like we're not supporting this DPW situation.
Well, I think certainly in my remarks when I present this, I'll make it very clear the reason, the rationale behind it. And in fact, this afternoon at Acton TV, I already recorded a segment explaining how we made that decision.
Forward thinker. David.
Perhaps Dean could amend his motion right here to say, in light of the fact that the project is not quite ready, we recommend no action on this article, on 4A.
Article 4, item A.
Yeah, so it's clear in the minutes for this meeting that it's not that we're against this project. It's that it's not quite ready for prime time.
So amended what he said.
We all clear?
Well, then Joan has to resecond.
Second
the amended motion. Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, David, call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye.
Okay, so our next item is to approve the amended town manager contract. Each of you were sent this afternoon the Fourth Amendment to John's original contract, which contains the updates for the provisions for the next fiscal year starting July 1. These terms were discussed in an executive session at our meeting on May 24 under Purpose 2 of the Open Meeting Law. That's preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel. The main points of the fourth amended contract are these. John's annual compensation would increase from $205,312 annually to $216,000. And in addition, he will receive a one-time $5,000 merit payment for his services over the past year, and that amount would be paid by the end of this fiscal year. His deferred compensation provided by the town would increase from 4.5% to 5% of his base salary. His HSA account would be increased, the town's contribution from $3,000 to $4,500, and his contract is extended by an additional year through June 30, 2024. So he has a 3-year contract from July 1, 2021, and it goes through June 30, 2024. So those are the main points. Any further discussion from board members?
Move to approve.
Jim? Is that
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the financial terms of the contract, and I'm very happy to vote in favor of it. I did have a question. Since at the executive session we mostly focused on the financial aspects. There's this section 1B under duties, and I'm just going to read it so we could perhaps talk about it, because I had some questions about it. It says, prior to the beginning of each fiscal year following the execution of this instrument, the select board and the employee will mutually establish goals for the ensuing year, and at least once each year, the select board will evaluate employees' performance in relation to those goals and its general performance of duty. So I guess
this is section what? This is section.
This is 1B, duties.
Okay,
part B.
1B.
Yeah. So I guess there's two parts about that. One is, I think, as I was reading through it quickly before, I thought, oh, that's those selectmen goals. But those are not mutually agreed on between the town manager and select board. We sit around and decide them and say, here, let's work together to try to make these happen. So I think these are supposed to be, the intention here, I think, was that these were supposed to be individual goals for the town manager. Like you'll do this, you'll have this amount of training, or you'll work on this particular issue, or you'll achieve these particular results. They're not organizational goals like the selectmen goals are. So that's one question I have is, it seems like we might need to disentangle these from the selectmen goal process, or adjust how we do that process. The other is that this particular year, the notion that we will do this between the signing of the contract, which is maybe tonight or tomorrow, and the end of the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1st, that seems unlikely. I don't think we're going to be taking time in the next, unless that's going to be part of the reason we're meeting in a week. But it seems awkward to try to cram that in the next few days, especially if we're going to think this is the same as selectmen's goals, which we would want to be doing in the next fiscal year, after we have the new board. So any thoughts about that from the chair or from the town manager?
Let me ask you this. When we do John's evaluation, which we did in May, when we talk about his performance and what we expect, is that the place? It seems to me that's the place. The annual review is where the goals get set.
Yeah, well, one of us, at least, not me, but one of us did write in a little draft of what our selectmen's goals should be, but we didn't discuss it. We didn't agree on it. So we didn't really do that.
Well, I think we were, if I remember correctly, we all gave John, extremely high, grades on all of the, I think, 15 performance criteria. I think it was about a 4.75 out of a possible 5. So I think, if he was short in areas where he needed to improve, I think that would have been discussed during the annual performance evaluation. I think that's probably where this is covered.
Oh, you can set specific goals, but what's happened over the last year and a half, none of us anticipated that. And so if there were goals, we had to switch dramatically to deal with COVID. And I think he did an exceptional job on that.
David?
Yeah, I brought up the issue of the timing of the goals in our discussions. And John said he was fine that if we weren't making the goals by the end of the fiscal year. When I brought that up, but perhaps when we have the goal setting meeting, Jim, we should also discuss whether there are other goals we want to talk about besides the town goals.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if John has a perspective he wants to share on any of this, if that would be okay, Mr. Chair.
John?
Sure, yeah, thank you. I follow the contract as closely as I can. Since I've been here, I've treated the board's goals as my goals, and I've attacked them aggressively in everything that I do. So if you want to give me more goals, I'll go after those too. But I'm happy to do whatever you'd like.
Thanks. So what I'm synthesizing from what David said and what the rest of you said, it's fine to, in this particular year especially, it's fine to wait till the new year to discuss all this. And it might behoove us to, to think about how we do the goal setting process. And, maybe we want to have a chance for the town manager to actually, express, any thoughts he has about the particular goals we're pursuing. And if we think of any particular goals that are specific to the town manager, not just general organizational goals, that might be a fine time to articulate them. So to summarize, I'm fine now. I'm glad we've talked about this, and I think we can take it up again next year in July.
Okay. Thank you. So is there a second to Joan's motion to approve the 4th amended contract for the town manager, Dean? Okay, Dean seconds. Any further comments? Okay, so David, if you please call the roll.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Mr. Charter? Aye. Sorry, I did this backwards the way I usually do it. Ms. Gardner?
Yes, aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
I believe our final item is we received a letter from the select board in the town of Pepperell asking if the board would like to participate in a virtual meeting on June 24 at 7 p.m. to discuss organizing a regional climate change network in an effort to facilitate our municipal actions to meet the Commonwealth's goal of achieving zero carbon footprint by 2050. I assume there's interest in doing that. That would be for the next board. But they wanted an RSVP by June 21st. Jim?
Yeah, in case the board thought this was a good idea, I did go ahead and RSVP. So I'm happy to be there. It might be good to have maybe Andrea or some staff person there as well, but that's up to John, but I'll certainly be there.
Okay, so it's done. So we don't need to take any action then.
They know we're coming.
Okay, so that would conclude our agenda for this evening. I take it you all signed up with Mark Ducci to have your pre-town meeting tapings done?
As far as I know, we were all there today. At least that's the impression I got from Mark. We all waited until the last possible minute, and we all got our taping done.
we're all comfortable, and Mark said he hopes to have them all up and running by the end of the week. So good viewing on Acton TV. Anything else from anyone?
Yeah, Joanne Barry and I were there last Thursday. Last Wednesday.
Okay. So,
motion to adjourn?
okay, we'll meet again next Monday night. It should be a short agenda, dealing with committee appointments, and the Powdermill issue as it relates to coming off the subsidized housing inventory and some consequences of that. So, okay, Joan's motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I